Hello, everyone. Hello. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? I feel like there we go. Now I can hear myself. Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessica Kimball, and I lead our diversity and inclusion efforts here at Mattel. And I'd like to welcome you to our first ever Women in Leadership series kickoff. We are very excited. We have a wonderful speaker here today to kick the series off, really talking about what the gender gap looks like in the workplace. But more than that, and I saw her speak recently, she's a wonderful speaker that really engages the audience quite a bit. So please, by all means, at the end, if you have any questions, Sahar's such a wonderful, sort of knowledgeable person in this space, so please be sure to ask questions. So once again, for everyone here, thank you for coming. I'm going to hand it over to one of our co-presidents of Women at Mattel, Mary Baha, to introduce Sahar. So thank you.
Thanks everyone for coming today. My name is Mary Baha, and I'm the co-president of Women Mattel with Joni Pratt. Many of you have noticed that there are buttons on your chairs. Hashtag We Rise. And we didn't have enough today, but we will definitely have more for our other events. But the theme of our Women of Leadership series is We Rise, because together, we rise together. So thank you for joining us today. We have one of our speaker today is considered one of our nation's authorities on diversity and inclusion. She's won multiple awards, including our Diversity Insights Award, a Leadership Excellence Award. She's also lived, worked, educated in many different parts of the world. So talk about being global. And on top of that, she's a founder of the Sahar Consulting and Reinvent Yourself to Greatness. So please join me in welcoming Sahar Andrade.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Before I start my speech, I just want to let you know what speaking at Mattel today means to me. I grew up overseas. So for me, Barbie was like, oh my God, Barbie doll. So today, coming here after all these years, and part of my dream coming true, speaking at Mattel, you have no idea what that means for me. So I want you to know that sometimes when we get too close to something like working for Mattel, sometimes we could not see the whole big picture and what it means to little girls, what Barbie actually means, what Mattel is doing. So it's like, I'm totally excited to be here today. That being said, so today I'm going to be speaking about how to close the gender gap and how to rise as one team. So the first thing that we need to talk about is gender diversity and what does that even mean. So gender diversity is basically creating a balance of representation of all genders despite of discrimination, despite of unconscious bias. And we're going to talk about all these points today and just go after the best talent for the job, regardless of the gender. That's basically what gender diversity means. And it doesn't mean that we advocate for a certain group and not the other group. But it's actually all coming together, basically like what it means here, rise as one team. Let's start by defining what gender is. So gender is very personal. Gender is who we are. And people mix gender and sex, and it's totally different. Because gender is personal, it's like who we are inside. And it's not binary. It's not about male and female. It's a full spectrum. We have the LGBTQA as well. And it's even more than that. So we need to look at gender not only as sex or sex orientation or how anatomically we were born, but actually gender means a lot more than that. It's not, when we talk about sexual orientation, it's about how we interact with others. It's not only personal, but how we interact with others and who are we attracted to. So the gender is basically the state of being male or female as judged by society and by culture definition. So it doesn't mean male or female, but basically what the society or community sees what is male and female. So despite how we are born anatomically, and we're going to go to that in details. So gender actually is three parts triangle. It's an interrelation between 3 points, between body, identity, and expression. So the body is basically what is the male and female attributes, again, based on cultural expectations. Identity is at the core of who we are, how we feel, regardless of how we were born. And that's what identity means. It could be male, female, a blend of both, or neither. It's basically who we are. Inside of us, we feel we are. And then the expression. Expression is how we express our gender on the outside, how we dress, how our hair is. And it's also based on very rigid cultural rules and expectations. So for example, only lately, the last maybe 10, 20 years, we started seeing men that can wear a little earring or women having tattoos. It used to be taboo before, but with the advancement and progress of society, we're starting to see little things that were not accepted before being accepted or at least tolerated in the present. So now we said gender, let's talk a little bit about diversity. So if I ask you, what comes to your mind when I speak about diversity? What comes to your mind? What do you think? Nations. What else? Different color skin. What else? Different cultures. What else? Different perspectives. What else? Religion. What else? Ages. Cognitive. Thank you. What else? Socioeconomic status. Absolutely. What else? One more and I'll go ahead. Experience. Thank you. Actually, diversity is all of that. And it's so strange that one word can mean all of that and all of them are correct. But people have that idea that diversity is only about differences. But actually, diversity is about both differences and similarities. But our brain is trained on seeing only differences. And we need to get out of that. Because it's like to look at how similar we are. So yes, it's about religion. Yes, it's about race. It's about color. It's about ethnicity, it's about race, but it's also about disabilities and abilities. It's also about sexual orientation. It's also about age and generation. It's definitely about gender, not only, like we said, male or female. It's about the diversity of thoughts, the learning experience, how people communicate, socioeconomic, the job, blue collar, white collar, pink collar. And we're going to talk about that today. It's about all that. That's what diversity means. Diversity is not the compliance word. It's not Title VII. Diversity, and I use to say that diversity is really the nice thing to do, but it's actually the right thing to do for business. And it can no longer be the flavor of the month. It can no longer be the glitzy words on a website. It has to become part of the fabric of who we are as employees, as executives, and as an organization. This is the only way we can move to the future. I'm not going to bore you with statistics, but it has been proven that diversity, actually, the more diverse your employees are, the more productivity you can get. And the more they deal with each other the right way. I always say this, when you value people for who they are, they give you value back. And the emphasis here is who they are, not who you want them to be. And there is a huge difference, just to accept people for who they are. So diversity, I was on diversity. So it's basically the unique characters that make us as human beings. Until 10 years ago, people used to talk only about diversity, basically pulling apart the differences that we have. And in some way, it acted more as an exclusion rather than inclusion. So from 10 years ago, we started talking about inclusion as well. Diversity without inclusion will not work. Diversity is also about experiences, about diversity of thoughts. So inclusion is how we constructively call out our differences and use it to our advantage to become the best potential that we can ever have. And if we just want to remember really quick what diversity is, we need to remember the word regards. So it's race, ethnicity, gender, age, religion, and sexual disabilities and sexual orientation. This is the easiest way to remember the foundation of what diversity is. So diversity is not tolerance. What does the word tolerance mean? To put up with, thank you. So do we want to actually be put up with as individuals? So why do we expect others to accept that? So it's actually diversity and inclusion is about acceptance. And acceptance doesn't mean that I need to accept all your beliefs, your behaviors, and your attitudes. It means that I accept that we are different, and I'm totally fine with that. It's not about tolerance, you know, and we need to pass that it's a melting pot. It's not a melting pot. It's not about assimilation. It's about integration, about who we are together, and we blend together, and we reach our best potential. Again, I hate the word tolerance personally. You know, I tolerate my brother-in-law. He goes at home at night. You know, I don't have to deal with him. And just to let you know, even in the house where I live, we do have diversity. I was born in Egypt. My husband is Hispanic. And we share a lot of things, including how we use the pita bread. I cut it in half and I use it as a sandwich. That's how we use it overseas. He uses it as a tortilla. He puts stuff, rolls it, and uses it as a taco, you know? At least we have something in common, pita bread. So it just, and again, the perceptions help. When we deal with different genders, the perceptions help a lot. So one of the things that happened in real life, that we were in our yard one day, and our neighbor came and asked my husband to translate something to her landscaper. And I turned around and I did translation from English to Spanish. And she was like, you should have seen her face. I'm just like, she was like, you are doing the translation? Her perception is that because my husband is Hispanic, he's the one that speaks Spanish. My husband doesn't. He doesn't. He's fifth generation, and he grew up he was the last of 10 kids. He grew up on his own, so he did not learn how to speak Spanish, and I speak Spanish. So we need to remember our perceptions, because we're going to talk about unconscious bias in a little bit. Our are perceptions realities? Yes, no? Yes. Yes and no? Actually, our perceptions are realities to us, but it's not to other people. Remember, our cultures that we wear on our sleeves is the lens that we see the world through. But what we always forget is that other people have different lenses that we need to respect. So leadership. So we talk about gender, what gender is, what diversity is. And now because we want to close the leadership gap, you know, with the genders, we need to talk a little bit about leadership. Leadership is not a title. It's not your business card, and it's not what you do. Leadership is not being a manager. Leadership is a choice that we make to lead people, to take that responsibility, that we want to move forward helping others. So it's a choice that we make, and it's for the rest of our life. We cannot start one day being a leader and tomorrow, I'm tired, maybe not today. We can't do that. Leadership is like, it's a responsibility that we take for every single day. So actually, leadership fundamentally is a shift in our identity. How do we become a leader? We have to shift a lot of things. And unfortunately, and just a disclaimer, I know we said gender is not only male or female, but for the sake of the discussion today, because we have a limited time, we are talking in the context of male and female. So it's not to narrow it, but just to concentrate on that because we have only 1 hour. I can talk for days about that, but anyhow. So what we do is like we throw women in and we tell them, you need to be a leader. You know, we toss them in, and they don't know what it is. So they think, okay, we're going to do some training, we're going to develop some skills, but they don't tell them what really waits for them. They don't show them that leadership goes around a purpose and about a why are we doing what we're doing. And they're just thrown into that. We're going to talk about that even more. So leadership, to seek leadership roles without addressing the procedures and the guidelines that some organizations have, where certain qualities of leadership are accepted for the men but not accepted for the women, is not fair. So this is something that we need to think about. And also, gender bias actually disrupt the cycle of learning specifically for women or for other genders, because it's the way it's constructed. So gender equality, basically, it means that all human beings, no matter what gender they are, no matter what sex they are, no matter where they come from, have the right to make their own choices, to develop their abilities without being touched by unconscious bias or discrimination, where they're all valued equally regardless of how they look on the outside or where they came from. They also have the rights and responsibility, they shouldn't be all equal. That's the beauty of diversity. If you're talking about diversity, we're talking about accepting people as they are, not as we expect them to be or not as we want them to be. That's what main gender equality means. So gender gap in leadership actually is a disservice that we do to the organization that we work in. It's a disservice to the community, and it's a disservice to humanity. And equality in leadership or crossing the gap of leadership, it's not Title VII, and it's not affirmative action, and it's not an EEO report, and it's not politically correct, and it's not a political movement. It's a right to be. Gender equality is not a woman issue. Gender equality in general is a society issue that we need to all be part of solving it. So what does the word minority means? Like in diversity, minorities means what? Less represented, less than. Numbers? Does it mean numbers? Okay. When we talk about minorities, part of the minorities are women, correct? In the US population, women are over 50%. So it's not about numbers, actually, when we talk about diversity. It is about representation, it's about access to education and access to wealth. But women are still considered minorities. By the year 2020, US labor statistics say that the workforce is going to be 50-50 women. 50% male, 50% women. Are we ready for that? Where are the women as far as leadership positions, roles? Are we ready to get them in? How are our succession planning is working? We are only, what, 2 years away? What are we doing regarding that? Not only for women, but basically for the gender. So it's not about sheer numbers that, okay, we're going to be 50-50 in the US, in the workplace. That means that 50-50 we're going to share positions, you know, we're going to share responsibilities, we're going to share leadership. So actually, by what we mean by equality is creating cultures where we can adopt and we can attract, recruit, and retain the best talent for the job. It's not, again, it's not about affirmative action and a quota and filling numbers because we need to. It's about choosing the best candidate for the job. So the glass ceiling is still uncracked. Do we know what a glass ceiling is? Yes? Okay. So do we know what pink collar is? Okay, so pink collar are jobs, you know, we have blue collar and white collar. Pink collar are the jobs that are usually left for women that are like the assistant executive, the secretaries, some of the teachers, some of the nurses, and they are kept there and they're not advancing, so they become part of the sticky floor. These are actually expressions when we talk about gender gap, the pink collar and the sticky floor. I personally do not believe in glass ceiling. I personally believe, you know what, let me work, get my leadership in place, buy the house, and put the ceiling and roof that I ever want. No one can basically put me inside the place and tell me this is your ceiling. I create my own. And that's how I felt most of my life. And that's why probably I moved to the United States when I was 21 years old by myself. Because I knew that I can do better. And nothing could stop me. You know, and again, leadership comes from the inside. It's not, again, something external to do. So that being said, just a few statistics without boring you. So Korn Fernie, who is a huge talent organization, they found out that female presentation, only 5% act as a CEO. And it never changed since 2015. It's a shame, since 3 years ago. Less than 1% of CEOs, females, are in the science industry. 12% are CFOs across the board, and only 9% are in the life science. We all know that we need more women in STEM. We all know. So I was so happy to hear that women in tech are getting a boost here. And just let me tell you, just to have, be the first speaker in a woman leadership speakers, you have no idea. Like, my heart is dancing inside, but I'm not going to show that in the inside. But that's okay. Peterson Institute did in 2016 actually a study, and they found out that organizations that used women in management executive places, they saw 15% profit spike. 15% throughout like around 1 year. These are things that we need also to look at. I'm not a big fan of numbers and statistics and all that, but I just wanted to share that with you to give you an idea how far we can go. So the main barrier for women to advance, or for the gender gap in general to advance, is unconscious bias. And we would think that unconscious bias will come only from males. Actually, it's from males and females. Unfortunately, there are women that see competition as being catty, and I need to pull you down so I can stand out. Actually, the word competition in its own meaning, it's a very old Greek word that means cooperation. It meant those teams that used to, like someone will run and then take the baton from the next person and move on. That was competition means, meaning we cooperate with each other. But some women take it the wrong way. And obviously, there is unconscious bias between males and females. And just to let you know what unconscious bias means. Unconscious bias, we don't have to be ashamed of it, because we all have it, no matter how open-minded we have. But people are very touchy-feely when we talk about it, because if I'm going to say I have unconscious bias, that might mean that I'm a racist. But it has nothing to do with that. Unconscious bias is our brain power to defend us. The first function of the brain is to defend us, to protect us about danger, either real or perceived. So that's why we are kept in our comfort zone. That's why we deal with people only that look like us, that speak like us, that think like us. And this is where in-groups start coming. And that's why we need to be very careful on who we mentor, who we assign for projects, who we interview, who we attract. All this has to do with unconscious bias. So we make decisions on a minute because of whatever we feel on the outside. And again, it could be perceptions, and perceptions can be right or wrong. So we need to stop for a second and think, am I having any unconscious bias here? And it's called unconscious because we don't know about it. So we don't have to be ashamed of it. But it's not that we have it, it's what we do with it that really count. Remember? So it's unconscious bias can lead to prejudice. Prejudice can lead to stereotype. Stereotype can lead to discrimination. Prejudice is an attitude, but discrimination is a behavior. So we need to know at least what kind of unconscious bias. And I'm sure you know Harvard did a very good test. It's online, it's free, it's the implicit bias test. If you take it, you'll be very surprised. I did it myself, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna score so high. And I'm like, oh my God, really? So I suggest that you take that test. So that's what does unconscious bias does? Usually, in general, they look at women as caregivers, and the man takes charge. That's the difference of what unconscious bias have. That when women are successful because they're lucky. That's unconscious bias. They have been in the right place at the right time. Their mistakes are noticed and remembered. Whenever there is a promotion that includes traveling or staying up or late, a woman is not even thought about to be offered that job. And again, I'm not saying that it happens everywhere. There is always individual differences wherever we are. So I'm not stereotyping here. I'm just talking in general. When a woman gets married and she is on the fast track list, she's taken off that list because she's going to get pregnant and she's going to be a mommy and she's not going to have time to move forward. Same for pregnancy. Inability to work after hours and join, the boys for drinks and all that. This is, they cannot travel, they cannot relocate. All these, I'm not saying that every single one of these is in every organization, but it goes from one reason to the other, or one or two at the same time. More of that, as when we tell women that you have to be a leader, and in leadership there is a feminine aspect and there is a masculine aspect, regardless of genders. So feminine aspect, meaning when you are trying to have the team discussion, have buy-in, you start conversation, you seek opinions. And sometimes in leadership, this is the best thing to do, but it's looked at as a feminine character. as soft, as mushy. But the masculine, and that's why sometimes men, because of the gender gap that we have, they feel they have to double down on their masculine character on being a leader. So assertive women, we toss them in and we say, you need to be a leader. And these are the characters we actually expect from a leader. So she becomes assertive, and all of a sudden, a woman becomes a man in a dress. But if she's really assertive, they call her aggressive, pushy, rude, and if sometimes even the B word. But if they are participative, they become too soft or too weak to handle a team. Assumption that woman's success is because a man helped her and not on her own merits. All these are part of the unconscious bias. That's why we need to get the unconscious bias out there. And also the women, how they feel themselves, their unconscious bias about their value. Because no matter how successful we are, we get parts of the imposter syndrome, specifically women. It's just like every single, I speak almost every day, but every single day before I go in front of a new audience, I have these little butterflies. And I start thinking, are they going to get what I'm going to say? Are they going to like me? And we all think about that, is how we train our brain to deal with it when it comes out. So how women value themselves, this is very important as well. And sometimes because of the unconscious bias, we feel that women need to perform even better and more than the men just because of unconscious bias. Not that any of these exist everywhere, but since I'm discussing the subject, I need to bring up everything that has to cover the subject properly.